Welcome, my colleagues all over the globe. I wish you well wherever you are listening. These are hard times when COVID-19 has forced us to work at home. But I believe the globe is making progress towards tackling that challenge. And soon we will be overcoming it. My name is Peter Mutia. I'm the Executive Director of Peterson Integrated Communications Limited. This is a firm based in Nairobi, Kenya, but with operations in the continent. We are members of Global Alliance, and I would like to appreciate the initiative by the Global Alliance to make April a training month. Justin Green and your executive team, well done. This is a very good opportunity for us, communications people, public relations people, to share experiences on our very noble profession. Let me share my screen so that we can move together. And my topic is going to look at the perspectives of leaders on the value of strategic communication. I have called it Citing Strategic Communication Through Lenses of Senior Corporate Leaders. We want to focus on this, and I will share with you some very practical lessons that we have learned from the alumni of Peterson Integrated Communication Training programs. In the last 4 years, we have trained hundreds of leaders, senior leaders, governors, deputy governors, board chairpersons, chief executive officers, board members, heads of departments, and other equivalent leaders. And we've interacted on the topic strategic communication, specifically using the power of communication to inspire loyalty and lead effectively. We have learned valuable lessons on the perspective of the C-suite on what they expect strategic communications to deliver. But let me start with some facts. A large number of leaders are not necessarily communications professionals. And actually, many are elevated to positions of leadership with little or no strategic communication training. Yet, they must communicate effectively to connect with stakeholders and the people they lead. And there lies the challenge and also the opportunity for us, public relations people. Common expectations that we have isolated from our training. And these are the expectations that senior leaders, CEOs, board chairpersons, and other leaderships position expect strategic communication to deliver. We have isolated 6 of them, and I'll go through this, articulating how leaders expect strategic communication to deliver on each of them. The first is contribution of strategic communication to the organization's strategic objectives. Leaders want that very well captured, measured, and demonstrated that strategic communication is contributing towards the strategic objectives of organization through these ways. That is the first expectation. The second expectation is that leaders want communication to help them connect with stakeholders. And they want actually to know whether that connection is established and it can be proved that indeed it is there. The third expectation, they want to harness the power of language and public speaking to lead effectively. The fourth is how to communicate effectively during a crisis, and what a fantastic time to discuss this when the world is going through the COVID-19 crisis. The fifth expectation that leaders have on strategic communication is how to effectively utilize social media and other online communication platforms to deliver the organization's goals. And the last one, leaders want to understand media relations and how to use media as a partner. Let's look at these expectations briefly. I will start with contribution of communication to strategic corporate goals. Now, communication, like any other function in an organization, must have a clear purpose. And that purpose is continuation of business. Strategic communication needs to speak, and not just speak, but resonate with the corporate objectives. And we know that when done effectively, communication has the power to accelerate the realization of strategic objectives of any organization, be it a government, be it national, be it non-profit, any organization. And in military language, this acceleration is referred to as force multiplier, rather doing more, better, and faster than you would otherwise do. So leaders want communication to do that, to talk to the objectives of the organization. The second expectation is to connect with stakeholders. And in our interaction with senior leaders during this niche program, the Power of Communication program, we have realized that communication as defined in the high school or college setup doesn't make a lot of sense to leaders. You know, passing information through a channel to a recipient, getting feedback, so what? And we have come up with a way of looking at communication that derives from the military definition of war. And let me confess that this particular definition is actually modified from the US Marine Corps definition of war. Our communication definition for leadership is that communication is an act of will directed towards a living entity that reacts. And I will break down this and show how that definition relates very well with connecting with stakeholders. An act of will, meaning that effective communication is goal-oriented. It is an intention. It is something that is well thought through, and it is strategic. But more importantly, it is about engagement with stakeholders, and it includes silence, inaction, and action. Now, a lot of organizations, or even leaders, would not talk on a particular issue. And they will say, well, we never communicated, we never said anything about it. But from our definition of communication, using the lens of leaders, action, inaction, silence is actually communicating. So you may take certain action, and those actions will make you connect with stakeholders. However, you may ignore some actions and you end up alienating yourself from the stakeholders. Directed towards a living entity, because stakeholders are not passive vessels that simply absorb messages. They are breathing human beings. They are alive. They have opinions, attention spans, fears, and dreams. And the first blunder that we have seen leaders make in trying to connect with stakeholders is to assume that audiences think and behave just as we do. The reality is most don't. And therefore, a very important aspect to connect with the leaders is to understand, to connect with your stakeholders, is to understand them, understand their preconceptions, and understand barriers that may prevent that audience from accepting your message. Once you understand your stakeholders from their perspective, and then you introduce your perspective that communicates and in a way that it is appreciated by the stakeholders, then you are connecting with them. Very important aspect. The third aspect is that reacts in our definition. And the only reason we engage an audience is to change something, actually to provoke a reaction. And reaction can be desirable, reaction can be undesirable. If reaction is desirable, communication is effective and connection has happened. However, if reaction is undesirable, then communication is ineffective and connection has not been established. But even as we look at those three aspects, we have also observed that leadership communication must be adaptive for it to remain effective and relevant. And when we adapt based on how audiences are reacting to the initial engagement or the ongoing engagement, based on what critics or opposition sometimes say, based on the environment in which communication is taking place, but even more importantly, as facts become outdated or new developments require attention, then we must adapt our communication so that we connect with stakeholders. And there is an hazard, blunder number 2, that we have observed, that instead of adapting, many leaders dig in. They persist in speaking the same way, doing the same thing the same way, and consequently, they lose connection with their audience. Expectation number 3 that leaders have on strategic communication, and if you want public relations, is how to harness the power of language and public speaking. And in all communication engagements, words matter. Words shape worldviews, and words provoke action. Words provoke reactions. For leadership communication to be effective, we must get the right word, get the words right. But matching action to the words is critically important. However, more important is even aligning the words and action so that there is then no disconnect between what an organization is saying, what a leader is saying, and how he is acting. And I just chose the words used when iPod was being launched. 10 days, 1,000 songs in your pocket, to just demonstrate the power of words in communication. 1,000 songs, that means 100 CDs in your pocket. And that tends to communicate better about that product, other than the technological or the scientific aspects of it. That 1,000 songs describes the power of that product more than its technological makeup. choice of words, very important. But also in language and public speaking, body language is important. More important in message delivery than the verbal communication. As a matter of fact, body language carries more weight in the message delivery. And research, scientific research has shown that body language, the tone, gestures, and all that, will deliver 93% of the message. Words will do 7%. Aspect number 4 is how to effectively handle crisis. That is an expectation that C-suite leaders expect communication to handle. And I'll quickly just talk about the success approach to crisis management from the leader's perspective. And the key to successful crisis management is mental readiness, which comprises 3 interrelated aspects. The first is emotional discipline, the second is deep knowledge, and the third is intellectual rigor. Let me just talk about them briefly, and I'll start with emotional discipline. The ability to shut off panic and remain calm when things are going wrong, when everybody is panicking. A leader is supposed to remain calm so that he or she can make rational and desirable decisions during a crisis. The human mind has a tendency to shut off critical thinking in times of intense pressure. And so when you panic, when you lose cool, when you lose calm, you are likely not to make the right decision. So that is the first aspect, emotional discipline on the part of the leader. The second one is deep knowledge. And deep knowledge is about understanding crisis and patterns of crisis, having a clear idea of what works best, what works sometimes, and what doesn't work at all. For example, we know that trying to vehemently avoid blame or passing it during a crisis tends to injure trust and often causes self-inflicted harm. I want to cite a case of a leader who in the recent past has attempted to pass blame on the COVID-19 to WHO. That doesn't work. Deep knowledge enables leaders to make smart choices, to pursue things that work and avoid those that don't work during crisis. But it also involves studying at your crisis to see how others handled it, and therefore avoiding going through the same trauma that they went through. And there are many cases that we can cite. Our training actually does lots of simulations, and we'll see that organizations and individuals behave in very predictable ways. And once you learn and understand what an organization did during a certain crisis, if you face a similar one, you are likely to go through it without experiencing the same trauma they went through. The third aspect of crisis management is intellectual rigor. And there is rigor in crisis management just like in other areas or disciplines of management. And part of that rigor says we must defer certain choices and questions until we have addressed certain other choices and questions. And I would like to appreciate my good friend, Professor Elio Fred Garcia, who is an expert on this, and a lot of these thoughts reflect his thinking, and not just his thinking, but actually the actual situation of rigor in crisis management. We must understand the relationship between trust and the expectation of stakeholders during a crisis. And that relationship is that stakeholders expect leaders to demonstrate care. To demonstrate care that something has gone wrong, somebody is hurting, probably somebody is facing intense challenges, and as a leader, you are required to demonstrate that care. Therefore, asking questions on the expectation of stakeholders allows leaders to take actions that are not self-centered and internal looking, but those that build trust and inspire loyalty. The more disciplined leaders can be in asking the right questions in the right order, the more they can successfully resolve a crisis. The fifth expectation from C-suite leaders on strategic communication is to help understand how to use social media and other forms of online communication. And without laboring the point here, leaders want to understand how to effectively use the various platforms available, which platforms deliver corporate value, which ones are their audiences using and therefore reachable, what are the assets? There are many. And strategic communication should be able to direct leaders to choose those that make business sense to the organization. And the last aspect is media relations. Leaders want to understand how to harness the power of media to advance the cause of their organization. They want to understand what is newsworthy information. They want to use media as a partner, not as an adversary. And they want to know how media works so that they can then utilize that knowledge to enhance the reputation, the performance, and the sustainability of the organizations. Those are the 6 aspects that we have isolated from our interaction with senior leaders in our training program. It's a detailed training activity that we do, and that was the best we could do for now. We look forward to continuous interaction with our colleagues, yourselves, through our email and social media platforms. And once again, we would like to thank Global Alliance, Justin Green and your team for making this exchange possible. Thank you very much.